Most solopreneurs hire someone to escape the chaos, and within 90 days, that person is gone. The chaos is back, and now you're doing their job on top of yours. Again, here's the part nobody talks about. That's not a hiring issue, that's a systems problem. And the reason it keeps happening, the reason smart, capable people keep making this mistake is because they're trying something new that has no documentation, no structure, and no defined outputs. You can't delegate a process that only exists in your head. So today I'm going to show you exactly how to fix that. 3 steps, a specific outcome at the end, and a framework you can start applying this week. So let's get into that. Here's the standard narrative you'll hear about solopreneurs hiring. Hire too late, scramble to onboard, new hire can't keep up, failure. That's the surface level story though, and it's mostly wrong. The actual failure point happens way earlier, before the hire ever walks in the door. It happens the moment you decide to delegate a job that doesn't exist, at least not in a transferable form. Think about what you're actually handing over to someone when you hire them. A job title, maybe a list of responsibilities, and a bunch of logins. And then you expect them to run a process that took you 3 years to build, intuitively in your head, with none of that context. That's not onboarding, that's guesswork with a salary attached to it, actually. Businesses that scale without chaos, the ones that hand off, work cleanly, keep quality high and don't collapse every time someone leaves, they don't do it because they hire better people. They do it because they build systems before they build a team. We can call it a franchise OS model for the sake of argument. And it starts with 3 steps that most solopreneurs skip completely. Step 1, map the load. Step 2, extract the code. Step 3, standardize the output. Do those things in order and you'll be ready to hire. Skip any of them and you're setting up your next hire to fail before they even start. So let's run through each one of them. Step 1 is the analysis or audit. Before you delegate anything, you need a complete inventory of every task that runs through you at this point in time. Not the tasks you think you do, every task you actually do. So here's the protocol for that. Take a full work week and log every task that hits your desk. Timestamp it, note the duration, note the frequency. Is it daily, weekly, monthly? And note the outcome. What does done look like for this task? And at the end of that week, you sort everything into 3 buckets. Bucket 1, high skill, high judgment. These are the tasks that require your expertise and you to make the final decision. That's CEO level work. This stays with you for now. Bucket 2, repeatable, low judgment. These are your first candidates for delegation. Tasks that follow a consistent pattern, have a clear output, and don't require your personal decision making to execute them. Client invoicing, social scheduling, inbox cleanup. These are the tasks you should be handing over first. And bucket 3, repeatable, high judgment. These are tasks that happen regularly but still require trained thinking. These aren't ready to delegate yet, but they will be once you've done step 2. Now here's the question that cuts through all the noise when you're doing this audit. If I disappeared for 2 weeks, what breaks first? Whatever breaks first, that's your priority for delegating. Not because it's easiest to hand off, because it's the highest leverage task you can remove from your personal plate and stop being the bottleneck in the process. Unfortunately, here is where most people stop. They finish the audit, they feel productive, they go hire someone. But that's the trap. Step 1, mapping the load, tells you what to delegate. It does not tell you how. It doesn't prepare your business to take on a new person. For that, you need step 2. Step 2 is documentation, but not the kind you're thinking of. So most solopreneurs, when they think about documenting, think about writing a list of steps in a Google Doc. That's not what this is. Extracting the code means turning what lives in your head, your experience, your judgment, your pattern recognition, into something someone else can execute without asking you questions, without guessing, without needing to think the way you think. Here's why this is hard. You've been running these processes for years, most likely. They feel obvious to you. Every shortcut, I just know how to check this. It's completely invisible to anyone else. That invisible knowledge is what kills the first hire. So there's a 3-part extraction protocol. Part 1 is to record yourself doing the task once. And we're not talking perfect tutorial here. A raw screen recording or quite literally recording with your phone is good enough. Just capture the task happening in real time. Don't edit anything, just do the work while it's recording. Part 2 is to narrate every decision. This is the part most people skip. Don't just show the steps, explain the why behind each one. What are you watching for? What makes you pause and reconsider? What does a bad output look like at this stage? So this narration is where your expertise actually transfers. And part 3 is then to define the output standard. What does done correctly look like? Not vaguely, but specifically. If you hand this task to someone and they complete it, how do you know, without asking them, if it was done right? Define that standard clearly. Pass or fail, no gray area here. In your franchise OS, this is the extract the code phase. You're not writing a job description, you're writing the source code of a task. And here's the harsh truth about this that many people don't like to hear. If you cannot document the process, you cannot delegate the process. That's not a staffing problem, that's a clarity issue. And no hire, no matter how talented they are, can solve a clarity problem for you. If this video helps you gain some clarity, let me know by subscribing. This signals to YouTube to show it to more people, and it helps me understand if I'm giving you the right message and the right value. I appreciate that. Step 3 is where the system finally becomes hire ready. Standardizing the output means this. Your hire doesn't learn to think like you. They learn to produce what you produce. That's a critical distinction. So most solopreneurs want to train their first hire to develop the same judgment and experience they have. And that takes years. You don't have years. You need output consistency in days or weeks. The way you get there is not by teaching intuition. It's by engineering a process so clear that intuition is not even required. McDonald's didn't teach every franchise operator to cook. They engineered a process so consistent, so step-by-step specific that the cook doesn't even matter. The system produces the burger. That's what you're building. And here's what a standardized output package looks like for any delegated task. 1, a simple but clear checklist, not a vague list of responsibilities. A step-by-step checklist where every item has a yes or no completion state. Not make sure it looks good, because that's an opinion. Write this instead. Image is 1280 by 720p saved as JPEG under 2 megabytes. That's a repeatable standard. 2, a completed example of the task done correctly. 1 real example is worth 10 pages of written instructions. Show them what right looks like. And 3, a list of the most common mistakes that happen with this task and how to catch them early before they reach the client. You've made these mistakes over time, so log them. Your hire doesn't need to repeat your learning curve. Now let's do a quick test. Just 1 question. It'll tell you in 30 seconds if you're actually ready to hire or if you just think you are. Here's the question. Can someone follow your process with no context, no ability to ask you questions, and produce output you'd be happy to send to a client? That's it. If the answer is yes, you're good to go. Your output is standardized and you have a system. If the answer is no, you have scattered knowledge and not a system. And what you're about to hand over to your first hire is not a job, it's a guessing game with your deliverables on the line. Here's the reframe to take out of this video. Hiring isn't about finding someone good enough to figure out your business. It's about building something clear enough to hand to them. The moment you flip that mental switch from I need to find the right person to I need to build the right system, your hiring success changes completely. Let me show you now where today's video fits into the full picture. The franchise OS has 6 phases. Step 1, map the load. Step 2, extract the code. Step 3, standardize the output. Step 4 is going to be the actual hire, onboarding in the first 30 days. Step 5 will be quality control and output tracking after delegation. And step 6 is replicating the system for scalability. Today we cover the foundation. You wrote the SOP, it has bullet points, it might even have a Loom walkthrough attached. Still, nobody follows it. As IT department head, I saw this happen day in, day out. And every single time the root cause was the same. The SOP was written by an expert, for an expert, in a language only an expert could understand. That's not a documentation issue though, it's a structure issue really. Most SOPs are designed to be read, but a process is designed to be executed. There's a big difference here. So let's talk about a 4-layer framework that turns documentation into something anyone in your operation can actually execute, without you being in the room, by the way. In the last video, we started building the 6-step franchise operating system. It's a complete business system for scaling any solopreneur operation without turning it into complete chaos. Step 2 of that system is to extract the code, pulling your knowledge out of your head and into a format other people can use. Most solopreneurs just stop here. They write the document, they share the link, they consider the work done. But it's not done. Writing a process is like source code, and source code that nobody can execute is just a text file really. So we're trying to close this gap today. There are 4 reasons your SOPs usually fail, and none of them are about motivation or attitude. They're all structural. Reason 1 is missing triggers. Your SOP exists, but nobody knows when to activate it. A specific event needs to start a certain function. When a new customer signs the contract, this process starts. When a support ticket hits the inbox, this SOP runs. If the trigger isn't defined, the process can't start reliably. Reason 2 is assumed knowledge. Chances are it was you who wrote the SOP. You know what every step means because you've done it 500 times. The new person, the new hire following it, has not. Every step that comes with assumed context will be done incorrectly or it will be skipped. As experts, we always underestimate how much we're assuming. And reason 3 is missing validation checks. There is no output standard really. So your hired help completes the task, marks it as done, and moves on to the next thing. But done and done correctly are different things. If you can't define what correct output looks like, you cannot verify correct execution. It's like you're flying blind on quality control. And finally, reason 4 is what we can call read-only storage. The SOP is filed away somewhere. It gets looked at once or twice in the beginning and never updated again. While the actual process evolves over time, the document does not. So the gap between reality and documentation gets bigger and bigger over time, until they're completely detached from each other. Here's the part most business gurus won't say out loud. You don't need better SOPs. You need a better SOP system. The content and the quality of documentation is usually not the problem. The structure is. What I'm about to show you connects directly to those 4 failure points. 1 solution per layer, and we can call it the SOP stack. 4 layers and each one is non-negotiable. Remove one of them and the process falls apart. So layer 1 is the trigger or the solution for not having an activation point. We said that every SOP needs a defined event that starts it. That's not random. It has to be very specific, like a calendar event, a form submission, or a contract signature. Whatever it is, it's written into the SOP. So if someone has to decide first if they need to run the SOP, they won't. The trigger completely removes the decision. Layer 2 is about boundary conditions, and that's the solution to under-delivering results or delivering the wrong results. We need to define exactly what the SOP covers and what it doesn't. What decisions are pre-approved, what escalation looks like, where this process ends and where the next one begins. Without these conditions clarified, chances are really high that the other person either does too little or goes off script. Layer 3 are execution steps, which solve the assumed knowledge issue we talked about earlier. So this is where most people start and why they fail. Execution steps need to meet 3 standards. 1. Every step starts with an action verb. Log the client name in the database. Not client details have to be recorded. Passive voice kills execution. 2. Zero assumed knowledge. If a step requires a tool, a login, a template, or a decision, that information must be part of the step every time. And 3 is numbered, not bulleted. Sequential steps are mandatory in a process. Bullet points imply optional. Numbers imply order. I know it's a small distinction, but it'll make a massive difference in output. Layer 4 is the validation check. And that one solves that quality control issue we talked about earlier. The validation check is the output definition. What does done actually look like? What proof do we have the SOP was executed correctly? So write it out. The client record is updated. The onboarding email is sent. The project workspace is live and the client has access to it. That's a validation check. If you can define it, you can verify it. If you can't define it, you can't manage it. Of those 4 layers, most solopreneurs are only focusing on layer 3. They write the steps, skip everything else, and then they wonder why nothing sticks. But the SOP only works when we complete all 4 layers. So let me show you how this looks like in practical terms. I'm building a client onboarding SOP using the 4 layers right now. Every solopreneur consultant has this process. Almost none have it documented correctly though. So that's the title right here, and next is layer 1, the trigger for the SOP. Let's keep it simple for now and just assume a client sends over the signed contract by email. No fancy automations just yet. The SOP gets triggered when an email comes in with the contract attached. Now we move to layer 2 and define the boundary conditions. First off, what does this SOP cover and what does it not cover? We can call those in scope and out of scope. In our case, the SOP includes verifying the client signature and archiving the contract. Anything else is out of scope. So sales process, proposal, pricing, negotiation, those are not part of the SOP. We can define pre-approved decisions, meaning the person working through that SOP is allowed to do things without knocking on my door and asking for my permission every single time. So let's say a pre-approved decision is that the client receives the standard onboarding package in return. Likewise, we can add an escalation trigger. Any custom deliverable request outside of contract terms flag to the CEO before proceeding. Layer 3 are the execution steps next. I won't read through all of them, just keep in mind that we have the steps numbered and not with bullet points, because this is a one step after the other process. And we want to make it detailed. So when the contract needs to be archived, we need to write down where, so it's clear to whoever runs the SOP knows where to put the document without asking us or me for clarification. And once we've mapped out the steps, we move on to layer 4, the validation checks. And this is our quality control process within the SOP. When all boxes are ticked in a real-life scenario, we know for sure the process is done, as in done properly without any question. With the 4-layer framework, we exclude any assumed knowledge. Literally anyone, no matter if they're a new hire or your mom, can run that process and get the same output every time. That's what a runnable, executable SOP looks like compared to one that reads well to an expert. If you're building this out and you want the full franchise OS series, definitely subscribe now. This is just one of the key operating systems for your business, and you want all of them. Now, videos on this are coming out every week. Either way, the shift I'm asking you to make is simple, but it changes everything. Stop treating SOPs like documentation. Documenting is passive. An SOP needs to be executed well. It has active triggers, it has boundary conditions, executable steps, and a validation checklist that tells you without guessing if the process ran correctly. When all 4 layers are in place, your operation runs the same way with or without you. That's what extract the code actually means. Not just writing it down, but making it executable. Because a business that only runs when you're there is not a system. It's a job with a lot of extra steps. Next week, we're looking at layer 3 of the franchise OS. Delegating the work correctly. And that's where we go from just documented SOP to an actual delegation process. You built the SOP, you hired the person, you handed over the work, and 3 weeks later, you're doing it yourself again. That's not a people problem, that's a systems issue. And most solopreneurs never figure out the difference. They simply argue, it's faster if I just do it myself. I know because I'm speaking from years of personal experience here. Let's talk about why delegation fails and how to fix it. If you've been following this series so far, you know where we are. Week 1 was about the 6 steps you need to build a business that runs without you. Week 2 was about SOPs, how to extract your process and document it in such a way that someone else can execute it without you being there. Now, week 3 is where the system comes to life, really. And it's where most solopreneurs completely collapse. Because after week 1 and 2, you've done the hard work. You've mapped out the load, extracted the code, standardized the output. You have the SOP, you have the hire, and then you hand it over. But that's when something breaks. Here's what's actually happening. You delegated the task, but you never established the system properly. There's 2 ways this usually goes. One is, here's the work, figure out how to do it. And then there is, here's the task, here's the standard, and here's how we audit the outcome. The first way creates chaos because people get handed a half-baked process that only the expert who created it understands, and they have to figure out what's actually happening. The second way builds a business that runs without you, clear, precise, and with measurable outcomes. Most solopreneurs are opting for that first path and they wonder why they end up doing the work themselves. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's diagnose the failure before we look at the fix. There are 3 failure modes actually. Every solopreneur hits at least one of them. Failure mode 1 we can call blank canvas delegation. Here's the task, you're smart, figure it out by yourself. There's no SOP, no output standard, no checkpoints. If you're doing that, you're not delegating, you're abdicating, which is a fancy way of saying you push away the work without caring much. The output will be super unpredictable in this case because no standard was defined in the first place. Failure mode 2 is the micromanagement loop. You delegate it, but you don't let go. You check in constantly, override decisions in the middle of the process, and ultimately pay someone to do the work while you end up doing it yourself. So this isn't really a trust problem, it's a monitoring issue. In this case, you haven't defined what done correctly looks like, so you substitute micromanagement for clarity. And failure mode 3 is the most dangerous one of them all, the reclaim, because it feels like the right decision in the moment. Work comes back wrong. You take it back and tell yourself it's faster if you do it yourself. You're probably right, at least in the short term. But every time you reclaim a task, you're programming into your business one thing. This task requires the founder. And every time that task is up, guess who'll be doing the work? It's you, of course. So if that's not the way to go, what does a working system for delegating look like? Well, we have 3 phases. Phase 1 is to assign the function, not the task. And there's a difference between write my emails and own the email communication function. When you assign the function, the other person doing the work gets an SOP, the output standard, the tools, and the logins. What they don't get is your personal preference for how to do it. Just because you like to send emails at 5 a.m. doesn't mean your hire has to do the same. Your SOP defines what the output looks like, not the method. Let the person find the method. That's how you get scalability. Now, phase 2 is the ramp protocol. This is the phase most solopreneurs skip entirely. For the first 2 weeks after delegating, you have to disappear completely. The other person executes by themselves. You review the output, and if you need to correct, you correct against the SOP, not against personal preference. If output misses the standard, You don't criticize the person, you simply update the SOP, the documentation. Wrong output means your extraction of information in week 2 was incomplete. Part of the process is still living in your head somewhere, so you need to pull it out, document it, and update the standard. Because the ramp protocol is for calibration, not people evaluation. Refine the SOP and the process first. Phase 3 is the first solo run. Eventually, you need to let go. Someone else needs to fully execute without oversight. This is the phase most solopreneurs never reach. They get stuck in phase 2 indefinitely, where they hand off the work and disappear, and that's it. Once you get the 3 phases right, it's time to stop doing the work entirely. Someone else should now be able to do it without you. That's one step in the direction of becoming owner of your business rather than being the operator in your business. But you can't just go with a hands-off approach. There's still the need to monitor the output of whatever you delegated in the first place. And you should do that in 2 ways. First one is a weekly output analysis. The goal is to double check if the real-life output your hire produced is matching the checklist in the SOP. If the answer is yes, the output matches the checklist, then no action is required, at least not on your part. But if the output doesn't match the checklist, either the SOP needs to be updated or the person handling it needs more training. In addition to the weekly checks, there should also be a monthly review. That's to double check if, let's say, there are inefficiencies in the process itself. Did your hire spot some friction or bottlenecks you didn't see so far? Generally speaking, any kind of monitoring isn't about catching mistakes. It's about maintaining and improving system integrity. You wrote the SOP, you hired the person, you delegated, you handed it off, and then 3 weeks later, you're back to square one. Redoing work that wasn't up to standard, answering the same questions, working even longer hours. Here's the thing, that's not a hiring problem, that's not even a delegation problem, that's literally a monitoring issue. No monitoring of tasks you hand to someone else means no control over the outcomes. So in this video, I'm giving you a simple CEO dashboard with just 3 basic metrics that you can check in under 30 minutes. It tells you exactly if your business systems are actually working without you touching the work itself. This is step 5 of the franchise OS, proper monitoring for systems you set up. If you neglect the monitoring, there are only 2 possible scenarios, and both are wrong. Scenario 1 is you micromanage. You're CC'd in every email, you're checking every deliverable before it goes out the door, and you've technically delegated the work, but you're still making every decision at the end of the day. That makes you an editor with extra steps and not a CEO, by the way. Scenario 2 is the other extreme. You go completely hands-off. You trust the system, which technically speaking is good, but you have no idea what's actually happening. Bottlenecks build, quality drops, a situation with a client turns into a crisis, and you only find out 6 weeks after the damage is done. Both scenarios have the same root cause, no monitoring in place. Now, we can solve this with the business OS, specifically step 5, and just to be clear, monitoring doesn't mean asking the hired help, how is it going all the time? We're looking for a structured review and a specific metrics process we can quickly check in less than 30 minutes just once a week. Basically, all we want to know is work getting done? Is work getting done correctly? And is the system under stress or is it underutilized at the moment? You can give these metrics fancy names like throughput, defect rate, or capacity load to stick with the IT lingo here. But the label doesn't really matter so much. What matters is that the 3 metrics give you a simple and complete picture of your system. Not other people's opinion, not vibes, just the facts. So when all the metrics are good, you're not needed in the operation. You're running the business and you're not working in it, which is what we want to achieve. But let me break down the metrics first. Is work getting done? That's the simplest one. Do you get the outputs you want to get? Not, is my person working hard? Not, do they seem productive? When you write an SOP, which you did in step 3 of the franchise OS, you define expected outputs. Send 10 emails per day, or have the report delivered every Friday by noon, or publish 2 videos per week. That's your target. So every week you want to check the actual work against that target. And of course, you can make up different categories of success. So if the ratio is above 90%, it means the system is performing well. If it drops to 70 to 90%, you should recheck the process for a bottleneck. Anything below 70% can indicate a systems issue, not a human performance issue, until proven otherwise. Again, system issue, not human performance issue. That's important here. The first assumption is never this person is lazy. It's something in the system that's creating friction. Maybe the SOP is unclear. Maybe there's a dependency that creates a bottleneck. Maybe the tools don't work well. Maybe you have an app that runs on monthly credits, but the credits run out before the task can be completed. So you would have to buy more credits to increase the number of tasks that can be completed. That's a systems issue and not a human performance problem. Is work getting done? That tells you if the machine is moving. The second metric tells you if it's moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, most solopreneurs skip this one and it ruins their client relationships quietly. Is work getting done correctly? Here we're looking for defects. How often do clients complain that something needs to be revised? How many times did you have to make a correction before work is sent off? Simply take the number of all tasks that were done in a single week and check how many were incomplete in one way or another. If you end up with an 80-20 ratio, I think that's pretty good for starters. If you end up having to redo 30 or 40% of the work, then that means there is an issue with delegation that needs to be looked into. Usually it's one of 3 things that went wrong. First off, the SOP isn't specific enough. The output standard wasn't defined clearly, and that's a documentation problem, which means go back to step 3 and rewrite the SOP. Then it could be the case that the person doing the work doesn't have the skill for the output standard. Like if I tell someone who has never touched any video editing software to edit this very video with the same animations, transitions, and settings, it wouldn't work. So that's a training problem, which means you need to go back to step 4. And the third reason could be that the feedback loop is too slow. By the time you catch an error, the other person already produced 10 more. And that's a monitoring problem we're trying to fix with this video. The final metric we need to address is if the system is being pushed too hard or not hard enough. Overload is easy to spot. Missed deadlines, high rates of work coming back to you, and your hired person telling you they're drowning in tasks. That is a capacity ceiling. But underload is equally problematic and a lot harder to spot. So let's say you pay for that app that runs on monthly credits, but you only use half of them. You're paying for a resource you're not fully utilizing. Same goes for the person who finishes 5 tasks but could actually do 8. For this, you have to specifically figure out how long each task takes on average, and then judge how many tasks you can expect to complete it in 1 unit of time. For example, I know I can produce 2 10-minute videos per week, but not 3 or 4. Definitely more than 1 though. So how does this look like in practice? Once a week, I run a system review. It takes less than 30 minutes and it tells me if my business is operating well or not. Going with the video example from earlier, I ask myself, is work getting done? So did I produce 2 10-minute videos this week? Yes. So the system is working. Is work getting done correctly? Are the videos I made comparable in terms of quality to the ones before? Yes. They're definitely not worse when it comes to measurable things like transitions, audio, B-roll, lighting, and so on. So the system is moving in the right direction as well. Now, last metric, is the system under stress or underutilized at the moment? So I managed to do 2 videos this week, not more, not less. This meets my standard. Now, if I would outsource this work to someone else, I would judge the metrics against the SOPs, of course. The key point, however, is that work gets monitored, generally speaking. The output of this review is making work visible. I'm not trying to control my system, I'm monitoring it, even though I'm also the one doing the actual work of editing videos at this point. But there's a difference, and that difference is what separates an operator from a CEO. Most solopreneurs will watch this video and think, hey, this is way too structured for a business my size. It's too much effort to do the work and monitor it all on top of that. It's exactly why most solopreneurs stay stuck at their current size. The franchise OS isn't about adding complexity, it's about removing chaos. And chaos, unmonitored or unmanaged, is the single most expensive thing in your business. If you're running it solo or with help from others, that doesn't even matter. There's one step left in the franchise OS, and that's scaling. Alright, you documented the process, you hired and set up the metrics so that the business is actually running without you being knee-deep in every single task all the time. Now what? Most solopreneurs stop here. They think that's delegation, period. And sooner rather than later, they go back to working inside the machine they built. But this moment right here is where the real leverage exists. Standardizing, delegating, monitoring. All this does is build a single franchise unit. Step 6 of the franchise OS is where you duplicate that. That's scaling the system and what we're going to cover today. So here's where we've been so far. Step 1, map the load. That's where we identify what was consuming our time. All the tasks we do on a weekly basis. Step 2 is extract the code. And here we document how we do what we do. And in step 3, we standardize this output. We convert the tasks into repeatable SOPs. Step 4, delegating, is when we actually give away that work based on the SOP. And then in step 5, we monitor the output with 3 metrics. Is work getting done? Is it getting done correctly? And is the system we build under stress or overloaded, or is it underutilized? It takes about 30 minutes a week to get the big picture business overview. But that's only one franchise unit, documented, staffed, and monitored. Now, step 6 doesn't just maintain this one unit, it multiplies it. And here's what most scaling frameworks actually skip. And it's why most businesses collapse the moment they try to grow. The default cycle when revenue grows is hire more people, find even more clients, produce even more output, and then hire more people and so on. It sounds reasonable, at least if you look at it from the outside. Unfortunately, that's the wrong move for most businesses. If you add headcount to an unstable system, you don't scale the output. You scale the chaos, literally. Adding more capacity in form of people does not make a broken system less broken. I've seen this firsthand as IT department head for the government. One employee couldn't handle all the work, so they hired a second one or even a third to spread the load across more people. But not once did someone take a step back, look at the work, the processes, the workflow, and question if they're dialed in. They just added headcount to chaos and cloned the problem. This is a scaling trap, and the solopreneurs who hit it always say the same thing. Hey, I delegated it and it made things so much worse. It didn't get worse because delegation doesn't work. It got worse because the unit wasn't ready to be replicated. Now, the correct sequence is system first, hiring second. Before you add a single person or a client or even a revenue stream, your existing system needs to pass 3 scaling conditions. Number 1 is throughput stability. Your output needs to hit target consistently, not occasionally. In other words, is work getting done week after week? If the answer is no, because one week it gets done, the next it doesn't, the system isn't stable enough to scale. Personally, I'd wait at least 4 weeks. Why 4? Well, week 1 is a fluke, 2 is a coincidence, but 4 is definitely a pattern. And that's the right signal to consider scaling. Now, condition number 2 refers back to that second question we have as part of the monitoring step. Is work getting done correctly? If more than 1 in 10 tasks comes back for rework, the SOP still has gaps somewhere. The code needs to be fully extracted first. Otherwise, you scale now and the new hire inherits the same defects, and then you might just end up patching errors instead of building capacity. So get the defect rate under 10%. Then scale, not before. Finally, scaling condition 3 is a necessary capacity buffer. Your current person or AI tool needs to be running below 80% capacity. Because if they're already at 100% and you add tasks to that, they don't have the capacity to work anymore. So 80% is a good number. Above that, and you're redlining the system even before you add new stuff to it. Now here's the part most frameworks skip entirely, and if you get this wrong, you'll be rebuilding from scratch in 6 months from now. You don't duplicate the person, you duplicate the system. And this is the core logic of the franchise OS. McDonald's doesn't clone chefs, they clone the kitchen, the recipes, the process, and the output standard. The chef is interchangeable in this scenario. The system is the asset. In a solo business, 3 things have to be duplicated. First off is the SOP, the documented process, not the person. The SOP is your manual. It's what allows the new hire or the fancy AI tool to produce consistent output without your personal input. 2 is the metrics, the same 3-metric monitoring system from step 5. Throughput, defect rate, and capacity load. Is work getting done? Is it getting done correctly? And is the system under stress or underutilized at the moment? Every new unit runs on the same dashboard. And number 3 is the review. Your 30-minute weekly system review doesn't get any longer when you add to the system. You simply add columns to an existing spreadsheet. It's one review block, but multiple units. And that's the cluster architecture. Multiple units, one operating system. And most importantly, one CEO not being stuck in any of them. So before you intend to scale, run a 5-point checklist. Is work getting done 4 weeks in a row? Is it getting done correctly 90% of the time or even more? Is the current system or the person at 80% workload or below that so that there's capacity left? Are the SOPs documented? Are they tested and without you being the one doing the work? Do you have a simple dashboard to track the metrics? Once you tick all of these 5 boxes, that's a reliable signal that you're ready to scale. Any red lights there or unticked boxes, don't scale. Fix the system first. Because a broken system only turns into a more expensive problem down the line if you scale too early. Which brings me to an important point people don't like to talk about. The goal isn't to scale fast, especially if you're starting out by yourself. The goal is to scale without breaking what you've already built. That's the franchise OS. 6 steps, 1 complete operating system. Map the load, extract the code, standardize the output, delegate, monitor the system or the output, and then scale the system. Now, of course, none of this system building makes any sense if the right mindset isn't there. So I've created a special video that talks about the mindset for solopreneurs. Check this out over here, and I see you there.